Hello, everybody. My name is John Cachet. I'd like to thank you for attending the AS13004 software demo. We have a good group of people registered, large and small aerospace companies. I was surprised actually about the number of large companies registering, and I included some slides for them that I usually don't put in. And special thanks to the people outside of North America. It's always nice when you because I know the time zone difference and how difficult it is for those to attend. A couple housekeeping items. The phones are muted because we've got a lot of people on today, but would like to spend some time with questions and answers at the end. We should have plenty of time for that. There's a block on your screen that you can just type in the questions. A copy of the presentation is available now. You can download it while you're on the event, or if you can't get that, send me an email. I'll get it to you. And everyone attending will get a certificate of attendance. 13004 was released late 2017 and designed to help people go through the process of process flows, PFMEAs, and control plans. It does align with the other AS series of standards. I did get, as soon as we started promoting this event, asking questions about AS9145 and does it support and scope that? The answer is yes. I actually scheduled another event on August 27th to tell you more about 9145. This is still going to focus just on process flows, PFMEA, and control plans. A couple quick areas to go through. Some of you may have already seen this content, but why did this thing come about? There's just been some real life examples. The JetBlue case back in 14 with engine fires, the FAA, saying we need to look into quality escapes and turbine engines. But the why? Well, there's a lot more supplier content going into engines. And it's a wide range of suppliers, big to small. I mean, under $1 mil to over $2 billion. And we're going global, so there's a lot of people around the world now getting involved in this. So the supply chains changed a little bit, and I applaud the aerospace industry. I think looking at all the things that can be done, and that's why 9145 is a whole different subject. We'll talk about that in a couple weeks. But for this scope, show me how to do the process flow. How do I do the PFMEA? How do I build a control plan? I know I need a list of key characteristics. I need a list of key process characteristics. Hopefully I've got some ability to either balloon my drawings internally, or if you're a supplier, hopefully your customer is sending you some balloon drawings or exports of that. But that's the idea of the spec. Every part number requires the process, and including all process steps that transform the product. Each design feature and characteristic must be included, similar to the first article requirements. PFMEA describes the product can fail to meet the design intent. Again, the knowledge is we're not asking for DFMEAs, you're not designing it, but if you know what the design intent is, we want to make sure that the product meets the design intent. Always want to be done by a cross-functional team. I know as a supplier, as you get smaller and smaller, there's not a whole lot of cross-functional people to go through, but we want to make sure that we get as much input from quality and engineering and manufacturing and purchasing when we're going through these analysis. And as always, it's a live document. It's not a one and done. We need to make sure that we know how well our process worked and how well it's complying. There's a lot of good material for the aerospace industry on this. The practitioner's guideline is an excellent guide, excellent document. The AESQ group provides Excel forms to do some of this work, but this is kind of where the problem starts. What I'm going to show you is a software product that was designed by a bunch of volunteers in the automotive industry that had been using spreadsheets for a long, long time to try to do these documents. And they came back and said, we love Excel, but we hate Excel. It's got a lot of flexibility, but things can break. So after going through the spreadsheet, which was kind of the problem, they came up with a way to do that. Now, interesting enough, the variety of documents that are out there, and the Aero Engine Supplier Quality Strategy Group, AESQ, recommends that suppliers invest in a suitable FMEA software tool to manage their level of data efficiently. So if I'm really, really small and I can do it in Excel and it works fine, use Excel. There's nothing wrong with that. But the next couple of slides I added because I didn't expect the larger companies to be attending. But here's the challenge of what's been going on with software. This is a document I've used for a long, long time, and I call it the manufacturing software map. And we look at the history of where did companies spend money investing in software. And of course, it started in accounting. The accountant said we had too much inventory, so then we looked at inventory. Engineering got some assistance with CAD systems and PDM systems and PLM systems. Marketing got support. Sales got support with CRM apps. Manufacturing got some MES support. But it still seems as though environmental health and safety and enterprise quality management systems are kind of still stuck in the middle, mostly done in Excel. And the reason I'm sharing this is because although this software I'm going to show you was originally designed for tier 2 and smaller companies, for plants and people that make parts, there was a pretty decent distinction between the people that design the parts, the DFMEA, outside the scope of this subject, and the people that make the parts, well within scope. And I'm sharing this because even though it wasn't intended for the smaller companies, we've had a lot of large companies, including OEMs and primes, that want to take another look at this. And just as I don't want to go off on a big tangent on this, but the challenge is if you're trying to smush together people that make parts and design parts, that's tough to do even culturally or personally face to face. They think differently, they act differently. It's just tough. If you try to do that with software, it's almost impossible. I've had several large companies come to me and said, John, we've tried to do this stuff in multi-million-dollar engineering systems and it failed. And we want to now say, is there some baby step that we can take between this Excel, Microsoft Project, SharePoint, K-Drive mess as a baby step to get us to where we want to go? And hopefully, if you have some questions, ask me about those. But when I saw the number of large companies in, I put those slides in just to talk about it. All right, so back to the 13004 scope and relationships. Process flow, PFEMA control plan, a couple characteristics we got to go through and look at. The actual software map that I'm going to show you, it's interesting because there's some functionality that I think you're really going to enjoy, and it's called the CTS view, and it's a hash mark around the process flow PFEMA control plan, which coincidentally is like the scope of 13004. And there's a bunch of other stuff in here that again, this is a 9145 conversation we'll do later. But the main part I want to show you is once I have a part and I have part and process characteristics, how do I build and author these documents and manage the documents? So let's go ahead and take a look at the software. This is the main page when you log in. Again, there's a lot of functionality that's kind of out of scope of this one. I'm just going to start with parts. This, of course, is the physical inventory of parts, part characteristics, operations, and what you have. Just as a quick note, the volunteers wanted, what they like about Excel is I can move columns around, I can filter on columns, I can sort by columns. They liked all that functionality. When I'm in edit mode, I have the ability now to go in and look at the, of course, the part characteristics, part types. This is very similar to the coding you've seen in your engineering systems or your ballooning software. This is the heart of the document authoring. This is a list of product characteristics, process characteristics, and operations. And then once I build that, I can then launch projects against it. Now, one of the things that I want to share with you that was really important to the volunteers is we had one that said, John, I have the same part number under 3 different revisions going out to 3 different customers. So I can't because the problem I have in Excel is keeping track of what version I'm on and who's it going to. So I need the ability to have projects that are assigned to customers for a particular part number and part rev. So if I go into edit mode, I can go up here and say, what customer am I sending it to? We'll send this one over to SpaceX. And then again, this project is based on this current rev. There is rev control in here, so when I go in and build and edit things, I can have different revisions of the app underway at the same time. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and save that change. And then I'm going to switch over to projects, take a look at the projects. Again, same functionality in here, the ability to move around and do different components of it. This is the essence of, again, there's tasks for APQP and PPAP. We're going to skip over that. There's meeting records, other team stuff. We're going to go right into forms, because forms is the essence, again, of how do I build the process flow? How do I build the PFEMA? How do I build the control plan? Throughout the software, you're going to see these little help signs. This is just some quick reviews that will walk you through. The forms tab we're on is where we create these records. The CTS view is a real cool way to navigate across the 3 forms. You'll note that DFMEA is not part of that. It's outside of the hash marks. There's a template manager in here. One of the things the volunteers said was, we know that there's standards being published in the automotive industry and in the aerospace industry. I showed you the forms, or the spreadsheet forms that you can download from the aerospace sites. But this particular customer wants this column added, or this particular customer they don't call it ops, they call it sequence. You have the ability to go in and change the labeling on all the columns and add and move columns around any way you want. There's the ability to go through and search. One of the things that was a problem with the spreadsheets is when they got really big, it was hard to find things, and I wanted to filter and sort on those. And then this guy I'll show you when we get into it, lets you just get more screen landscape. Every time on a web app you want to edit something, you got to tell the app you want to edit it. So there's a pencil that goes up and says, hey, I'm going to edit this document. And then all the documents, all the forms can go out to Excel or PDF files, however you want to see it and send it out. So let's get started. If I'm in a process flow, I'm going to click the edit button. Let me go ahead and add. I'm going to click this big icon button so I get more screen out of it. Then click the plus sign, and it's now going into the part file and bringing out the information about what operations I've used, what characteristics I want to have. And once we start doing this, I'm going to go ahead and click Save. When you see these icons that showed up after the plus sign disappeared, this is where I can add another one below. I'll put in another op 10, put in a different characteristic. I can also copy it if I just want to put in different control methods for it. I forgot to put in control methods. So it's kind of point and click, building off of the part number table. The other thing that was important as the early adopters started moving forward with this is they said, well, I really need the ability to take this guy up, and I want to put it up higher than this. So I can move and sort things around any way I want. So now that I went in there, I said, here's my process flow. Well, what's the PFEMA look like? And of course, the integration should say, well, if I already entered all this in the process flow, it should show up in the PFEMA, which it does. All these failure modes, effect modes, classes, and whatever are user defined. You can type directly into the form, or you can load from a lookup table. That's up to you. And then the same logic would say, well, if I put it in the process flow and the PFEMA, it should show up in the control plan. And that's where you're seeing the information. Now, what happened with the volunteers is as we were going through and speccing this out and talking about how we wanted to behave, they realized that the process flow and the PFEMA and the control plan, first of all, getting it out of a spreadsheet and putting it in a database is nice because once it's in there, and no matter where I edit it or change it, we'll go ahead and make this, hold on, we'll make this a step 15. So I can add stuff that's not necessarily in the product file as well. That they realized that it's all just one big database. So as they started to build the process flow and the PFEM and the control plan, the CTS view is that screen that is the hash marks that goes around the 13004 scope. So this is where you have the ability to go across all three forms, see all the data entered, all the record information entered, and you have the ability now to know that there's no broken linkages. If I enter it, it's in the database. It's there. You don't get to accidentally delete a column or a lookup or something like you can in Excel. It's in there. Now, once they got that far, they said, well, John, sometimes I put stuff in a process flow for my people, for my operators, but it's not part of a risk issue. It's not really a process FEMA issue. It's not a control plan issue. So basically what they wanted to do was turn off content if needed. And that's what the row visibility slide does. So what we've put together is a very basic relational database that's based on the part files that have revision levels and customers who you're selling it to. By the way, the software can do, you're sending it to a customer, it's an internal document, or from your suppliers to you. The ability to rapidly create these and build these and bring them together. That is the essence of it. One last thing I do want to show you, because it was important to volunteers. They said, is there ability that I can, as soon as I log in, and this is what they're wrestling with, is SharePoint or the K drive, wherever you put this thing, however we came up with it, we're going to do a folder by part number and then all the customers in it, or we're going to do it by customers and then the part, whatever it wasn't what they needed. So they said, if I can just log in and click and say that's a project that I'm a part of and working on, and click on it and go to it, that would be very helpful. And again, in here, we talked about the ability to search within the forms. I want to see linear, bring up. So a lot of flexibility in how it's built and how it's put together. So hopefully with that, you saw a very simple tool to build process flow, PFEMs, and control plans driven off a relational database that you can import your parts, you can import your part characteristics, put all that information together. And again, just for the smaller companies that are joining us today, I put these in as well. This is all about improvement. Here's a story from, again, the SAE-ITC website, most improved supplier, the ability for putting this together. They saw immediate benefit working with Rolls-Royce and looking at the characteristic profiles to take it out. Here's another example I found where they went a little more detail, but boy, we found things we didn't know about, things that were causing our high risk, some prevention ways that we didn't have in place to do it. So long story short, this is much more than just filling out forms, which is what it kind of became in automotive a little bit. Fill out the spreadsheet, email it to them, we're done. We're now taking it up a step. And if you remember that document where it's trying to say, if I'm working with Excel and spreadsheets, and then I've got these PLM systems, there's something in the middle that makes it better, quicker, faster for each of you to go through and look at it. One of the things I would really, really encourage everyone on today's webinar is to leverage IAQG. Great group, great website, unbelievable amount of free stuff. If you've never been there, you've got to go and check out the Supply Chain Management Handbook. And again, there's 9145 forms on it, a lot of material. Of course, the Aerospace Engine Supplier Group, AESQ, great organization to put together this standard, focusing on how do we make sure that things go through and get better. I usually don't put this in, but two of the people asked me ahead of time to talk about pricing. First of all, you can get this on premise, or it can be hosted in an ITAR compliant environment. There's a bunch of services that can go with it. The larger the companies, they want things customized, integrated, all that can be provided. The one thing I do want to let you know is it's based on concurrent user pricing. And for those who don't know, most cloud apps now are named user license, which means anyone who ever logs into the app has to be a user, and you pay for them. Now that means whether they log in every day, once a week, once a month, once a year, it's all the same pricing law. The concurrent user, and especially for the large companies today, gives you the ability to say, I have 50 people that are going to use it sometime, some go in a lot, some don't. And if I get a 5-user license, then any 5 employees, regardless of who they are, can access the software. The 6th guy gets bounced. When I first announced that, somebody came up to me and said, does that mean that I can buy it for a global license, and when they're sleeping in North America, I can use it in Europe and Asia? And the answer is yes. So a lot of flexibility on that. Next steps, if you kind of like the feeling of what you saw and what you're looking at, be happy to do a private webinar with your team so we can have the phone lines on and go back and forth and look at what you're doing, look at how you're currently doing it, if there's any potential benefits internally and with your suppliers, and kind of quickly come up with a makes sense or doesn't make sense. I did put a note in the corner, partners are welcome. We do have some consulting firms, international consulting firms on today. If you have some clients that may need this, I'm happy to work with you on that as well. As promised, this is the AS9145 software demo. It's going to be a little bit longer than this one because we're going to go through a lot more of the software functionality. We'll talk more about the task and how things are put together. Here's the link for that, or you can go to the puproso.com webinars website to register for that as well. So hopefully we got some questions. Let's take a look and see what's coming in. One is, once we export data to Excel, can we make changes and put it back in? The answer is no. The volunteers had spent a lot of time trying to say, first of all, are we going to import old spreadsheets? Because everybody has a library of all these old things. And long story short, the answer was no. One, because they weren't confident that the old ones were done correctly. But more importantly, that whole thing about breaking linkages and making sure that everything shows in the right place, it can be done. But for the amount of time and money to develop for the volunteers, they said, no, that's fine. We're going to build everything in this. Their main thing was, they called it file save as, but they said, once I get a part in there, if I can copy it and replicate it, that's fine. And once I get a project in there with a bunch of forms, if I can copy it and trigger it to another revision, that's fine. So long answer, short answer is no. You can't go from Excel and back in. How does the software manage programs which are under export restrictions? Understanding export restrictions and all the ITAR requirements, it's really not managed by the software as much as it's managed by the organization using the software. And I'm not trying to give a flippant answer. It's just that's really kind of who can have access and who can do what in the app is how you can control that. The CTS view, can you explain that again? Yes, the CTS view is a single view of the entire relational database across the process flow, the PFEMA, and the control plan. And the idea is that we wanted to make sure the we want to make sure that there was no breaking linkage, that I didn't put something over here and it didn't make it over here. What I was trying to do, and I know the demo was quick, what I was trying to show you is once you enter it in any of those forms, and you can enter it anywhere you want. I started in a process flow, but if you want to go to a control plan, go to a control plan. Once you enter it, it's built for all. Can you share the link for the case of the supplier who worked with Rolls-Royce? It's in the slide deck that you should be able to download. If you can't find it, I'll see if I can send it to you outside of the call. Custom forms. I'm going to paraphrase this. This is a long one. Oh, remember, I was describing the custom template. This customer wants it this way. This customer wants it this way. This customer wants it this way. What they're asking is, can you teach your employees internally and operate your internal process with a consistent internal form? And then they have in quotes, switch to a custom template when publishing. Theoretically, yes. Without knowing how different the customer layout is, it might work really well and it might not. If it's just some cosmetic changes to like labeling, absolutely. If they're adding some columns that aren't in your standard one, that might mess it up a little bit. But you get the idea, yes. What if we already have an ERP or QMS or PLM app? All right, again, just a quick note on this. I'm going to share with you some experience from the volunteers I went through. One of them was adamant that their ERP app already did all this. It's a waste of time. We don't need to build another app, yada, yada, yada. So as a plant guy, I always walk out to the plant and talk to the operator or the people who are doing the work. I said to this, and it was a relatively high executive, it was a VP of Quality Assurance. I said, I want to talk to the person that does the work on these forms every day. And it took a while, but I finally ended up talking to her. And the punchline is, when I asked, how do you author these documents? She said, I do it all in Excel, and then I upload it into ERP. Now, the reason I share that story with you is there's some very interesting perceptions, again, as the company gets larger, and that's why I put in those, and I'll go back to this real quick. That's why I put in those slides about the different ERP software and stuff. There's a lot of bad perceptions about what is actually being done where and how. And so back to the question, if you already have one, talk to the people that are doing it, talk to the people to see what's going on. If they're trying to do it in Excel and send it up here, what I'm suggesting is the software I showed you today is essentially a way to bridge the gap. It's to take you to a baby step to get a little bit better, get rid of all the things you don't like about Excel, keep the things you like. And I had another executive say, you know, if I could go from here to here and 2 or 3 years later, then we could talk about going up here, that would probably work. Okay. Here's how are the libraries created DFMEA, PFD, PFMEA? When I say libraries, I'm referring to a list of company-specific requirements, tolerances, process step features. And I'm sorry, you may have gotten on after we started, but there's 2 ways to enter information, actually 3 ways to enter information. One is part specific, part number, revision level, product characteristics, process characteristic, ops. There's another in admin, a reusable library, where and I'll just make an example, we make tire rims, wheels. A wheel's a wheel's a wheel. So you can do it by families if you want. You can also do stuff specifically in the forms. There's a lot of flexibility on how we can build those and put those together. Okay. I think that's about it on the questions. Again, thank everyone for joining us today. I appreciate the time. Um, the thought behind this was just giving you exposure to it. If you or your team would like to have a private conversation about how it could work, may work, maybe more detail. I know I just gave the library answer, a very quick answer. We can go in a little more detail on these, but thanks for attending. The recording will be sent out with a thank you email. And if you're interested, please join the AS9145. That webinar is going to go probably about an hour, twice as long, because we're going to dig into a lot of the process steps and information around it. But again, everyone, thank you for your time and for attending, and have a good day.